Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and back to more news about The Witcher, because even though it's after Christmas, it is just the gift that keeps on giving. This time, talking about how fans are just shredding the Netflix prequel. What the heck is this? Fans are ripping Netflix's Witcher prequel to shreds. So full disclosure, I haven't watched this, nor will I watch it, because frankly, I don't want to give Netflix the clicks. I know there are people out there that will hate watch it, or they will watch things that are popular just to put reviews on YouTube. Very rarely, if ever, will I do that. I just want to cover the news and the articles and the backlash behind it, which is what I'm doing here, and hoping that this is a personal win for Mr. Cavill himself. So let's go through this article. I can remember a moment just prior to Netflix's 2019 debut of The Witcher when it felt like the stars were in perfect alignment for the franchise. Back in those halcyon early days for the series, fans were so hyped, and the casting of Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia felt so spot on that it wasn't long before the same hopeful speculation was elsewhere. Maybe, just maybe, Netflix had a Game of Thrones-sized hit on their hands. I don't know if The Witcher was ever going to be the size of Game of Thrones, even if it was perfectly adapted from the books and the games, and even if everyone loved Henry Cavill. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it has the franchise power as something like Game of Thrones, but that's just me. Unfortunately, what's happened since The Witcher's well-received first season, including a yawn of a sophomore season, the announcement of Cavill's departure, and the debut on Christmas Day of a roundly panned Cavill-less prequel series, has been nothing short of a masterclass in how to utterly ruin a franchise. Well, to be fair, I did hear that they were taking How to Ruin a Franchise 101 with Rian Johnson. Setting aside the huge disaster that surrounded Cavill's post-Season 3 departure next year, the full story of which still hasn't been told. No, well, we all know the story. Check out my previous video on Henry Cavill and The Witcher for that. Much to the displeasure of fans, the franchise's new 4-episode prequel, The Witcher Blood Origin, has been pretty much ripped to shreds by both critics and fans alike. Wow, critics and fans alike. Yeah, I've heard this is actually a super woke, pro-feminist show, so the fact that even critics are tearing it apart, it must do some other stuff egregiously. As of this writing, the prequel has an awful 35% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Holy wow. 35% from critics? And a staggeringly bad audience score of just 9% on the review site. Now this I can see. Given the situation with Henry Cavill, given how critics and audiences rarely agree, I don't find this number near as hard to believe when they say it's staggering. We've seen this happen with plenty of woke propaganda shows. But this number, that is just mind-boggling. I've watched a few individuals on YouTube talk about the first episode, and I really couldn't watch them talk about any other after that. Just hearing people talk about the first episode was hard enough to get through. I can only imagine how hard the actual first episode is to get through. But it's good to know that even critics think so. Some people are saying Netflix lost their touch. I don't know if Netflix ever really had a touch, so much so it's just got lucky a few times. I mean, I think the vast majority of Netflix originals have always been pretty weak shows. Moreover, boy oh boy did the Rotten Tomatoes audience reviewers come in with guns a-blazing. Here's a sampling. Acting is meh, writing is atrocious. Why no? Witcher in name only. You can tell the writers have a real disdain for the source material, and this comment right here will sum up why everything is bad recently. Adaptations of anime into live action, like Death Note, adaptations of The Witcher, frankly, in my opinion, they disdain the source material for the regular Witcher series as well. You could say this about modern Disney Star Wars, and probably about Indiana Jones that's coming up as well. Watch my video on Indiana Jones. When you have a disdain for the source material, or don't care about it, or have the absolute gall to think that you can do better, rather than just adapting what someone else has done that stood the test of time, you are immediately going to alienate your audience, and to have the utter arrogance to think that no one will be able to tell, or that they're just going to be a vocal minority and that it's not going to affect your sales, that is a level of overinflated confidence that even I can't fathom, and I've got a pretty big head. All I have to say is oof. If this is the caliber of writing we have to look forward to without Henry Cavill there to fight for the remaining true to the source material, the main show is going to go downhill fast after Cavill is replaced by Liam Hemsworth in Season 4. Yes, I think the vast majority of fans also have this sentiment in mind. The only reason it was as true to the source material as it was, and even then it really wasn't, was because you had Henry Cavill pushing and fighting for it. We've seen, thanks to this show, what they can do when they're left unchecked, and it is abysmal from everything I've heard, and here we even have the critics score backing that up, which again, I must stress, is a rarity. It's so bad that I actually looked up who the writers were to remember not to watch anything again. Wow. In a way, that is impressively dedicated. Just imagine every TV show Netflix churns out and Homeboy just hopping on IMBD real quick being like, okay, good. No Witcher Blood Origins writers. Let's do this. A mere 24 hours after the prequel's debut on the streaming giant, it had already shot to the very top of Netflix's top 24 shows list for the TV. This suggests, at minimum, there was a lot of hate-watching going on yesterday from aggrieved fans who believe this franchise is being wildly mishandled. Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. It seems like there's probably a lot of hate-watching going on, or maybe there was a lot of mild curiosity watching that turned into hate-watching. I mean, I can really only speak for anime, since I don't watch a lot of live-action series. Don't get me wrong, I do from time to time. I love True Detective, the early seasons of Supernatural. There's a few live-action shows that I do really enjoy. But as a whole, with modern writing and modern Hollywood, there just aren't a lot of TV shows I care too terribly much about. But when we switch gears to anime, I don't necessarily hate watch so much as I always do follow through to the end of the season. Because even if a show is bad, it can turn the corner and get good near the end, or if it stays bad, I like to at least have an informed opinion on how bad it is or why it's bad, so that when I give my review or my thoughts on it, well, I know the entirety of the show. So I'd like to think that this is what a lot of individuals were doing with this show, but then again, maybe it was straight hate watching. I hope it isn't, because I don't want Netflix to get those numbers and say, hey, we had 432 million minutes viewed, let's make more, or, whatever metric they use. The show is just boring. The team behind The Witcher Blood Origin, meanwhile, includes writer, showrunner, executive producer Declan DeBarra and producer Lauren Schmidt-Hirsch. She is the showrunner for the original Witcher Netflix series, if I remember correctly, the one that Henry Cavill supposedly was having issues with, the one that Jeremy from The Quartering had that really cool and interesting dialogue with that at least made her a bit humanized and not necessarily deserve all the hate she got. Assuming lessons were learned. Well, it doesn't look like lessons were learned here, so maybe that good grace we gave her was a bit overextended. From Netflix's logline for the prequel, set in an elven world 1,200 years before the world of The Witcher, Blood Origin tells a story lost to time, one of 7 outcasts who unite against an unstoppable power that took everything from them, their blood quest giving rise to a prototype Witcher in a conflict that brings about the conjunction of the spheres, when the world of monsters, men, and elves merge to become one. What is so unfortunate about the show, in my opinion, and why it might even be beyond saving at this point, is the way it's become something of a MacGuffin among fans. It feels like the discourse around it isn't about the show. Everyone's caught up in talking about the show. That is completely fair. I've not watched the show, but this article is popping up on my recommended articles. Reviews for the show are popping up on my recommended tabs on YouTube. I can actually see this being a valid criticism. The commentary is largely about things like creative direction, the reasons Henry is leaving, changes to the narrative, and insistence among the fans that the writer's room must obviously despise the source material, and on and on. Now, while all these are true, people are more interested in talking about all these things behind closed doors. I also think they are worth talking about, because a message needs to be sent to the people behind those closed doors. If you're going to be creating art that is a representation of somebody else's art, then you have paying customers that you need to please, because they are the ones that this product should be for, because it's not just art, it is also a product. So, while we should be able to talk about the show on its own merits and what it does well and what it doesn't do well, these sort of backdoor dealings do have a place in the discourse, because it could alter the future of how not just this series, but all beloved nerd franchises continue in their creation going forward. The whole thing is, I didn't stop watching because they stopped following the books, one Redditor explained. The show is just boring. I hate to say that, but it is. Even in the moments where they follow the source material, the show is just boring. Way too much emphasis on making Yen a main character or trying really hard to get all these characters from point A to point B. Season 1 felt super rushed because they obviously want to run the Father Geralt storyline in Season 2. In the head scratcher, I have yet to find a good answer for why Netflix keeps canceling shows like Warrior Nun that have a passionate, committed base of fans, while the streamer allows franchises like The Witcher to be absolutely run into the ground. That's fair. I heard that Warrior Nun was a very, very beloved show. It's not one that I'd even heard of until its cancellation because, well, given what I cover, articles were popping up in my recommended feed for Netflix just cancels most popular show, or Netflix cancels beloved show after one season, things like that. So the extent of what I know about Warrior Nun is from a post-cancellation era, but it is still a good question. You have people actively ripping on shows like this, but cancel the ones that are being spoken positively of. Now, it could be a numbers thing. There might be a bunch of passionate fans behind the Warrior Nun, but the numbers just don't justify keeping the show going if it's expensive to make. But by the same token, the numbers argument doesn't really work here either. Yeah, let's say you got a bunch of amazing streaming numbers for Season 1 of this. That doesn't immediately mean make a Season 2, because if you look at the reviews, and they're this low, well, that should be an indicator that when you make Season 2, very few people are coming back. Therefore, you'll lose money then in the future, even if you made money off this particular project. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I definitely understand this little paragraph here. Yeah, that's about the extent of it. I mean, if you want my opinion, and I'm sure you do, I mean, that's why you come to this channel, I don't know that this show is exceedingly woke or propaganda-driven, because I haven't seen it. I also know that and a lot of times, they're not going to put that sort of information in mainstream media because it goes against the narrative. So maybe the show is like that. All I know is that viewers are hating this show. I probably wouldn't be a big fan of it myself if I'm being completely honest. Well, I'm not a huge fan of The Witcher as is. I was a fan of Henry Cavill and am a fan of Henry Cavill, so I was willing to give a universe that I didn't know too much about a shot. But unfortunately, aside from him, it wasn't very good. And now, a prequel set 1,000 years prior without him, with, from what I understand, all made-up stories that aren't actually part of the source material. This is all original writing. Knowing what I know about modern writing in Hollywood, none of this seems like it would be for me. None of this seems like it would be for a lot of individuals, fans or not. Who is this for? When you're making a product, you should probably know your target audience. I don't see a target audience for this. So now you have people hopping on Netflix on Christmas Day after all their presents are opened and their bellies are full of food and they're ready to just veg out and relax the last little bit of their day off. And they get treated to this abysmal show to the point where they're even motivated to put the recliner down, pull their cell phone out from their back pocket, hop on Twitter and actually write some blurbs about how atrocious this is. I mean, Netflix, you gotta do better. I mean, to quote Falcon, I mean Captain America.
You've gotta do better.
But that's all I've got for this one. Tell me in the comments below if you've watched the show, what you think of it. If you're a Witcher fan, what you think of this. And please, if you're an anime fan, watch my Bleach 1,000 Year Blood War review, because frankly, I worked pretty hard on that script, and I will be working hard on the upcoming Chainsaw Man review script that will probably be out tomorrow. Until then, please subscribe to my channel, because since I'm trying to grow it, it would mean the world to me. Follow me on Twitter @BoltTheWord, because this has been Words of Paradise.